Hello, my name is Steve Hannon. I'm a business advisory consultant here at Thinc. Thinc are an IT solutions provider based in South Manchester, although we have regional offices across the UK. And we have a real focus on cybersecurity, securing our clients, their environments, their infrastructure, and ultimately securing their people. I'm joined today by Martin Hart from CyberShelter, who are cybersecurity certification specialists based out of the Northeast, but I'm sure Martin can throw a bit more colour about what Martin and CyberShelter do.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for asking me over, Steve. My name is Martin Hart. My business is CyberShelter, where we provide certifications called Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus through a company called IASME, who manage the standard, but ultimately the standard belongs to the National Cyber Security Centre. We're a certifying body, done this since 2018. Prior to 2018, I owned my own IT business. I was always the go-to guy for cyber security, for firewalls, setting up that sort of thing. Sold the business in 2018 and really started CyberShelter as a way of keeping busy. Cyber security has become a bigger and bigger issue, which has got me busier and busier.
The threats is becoming more intelligent. The threats are becoming more subtle,
Yeah,
but still have the same catastrophic effect.
yeah,
But really, in the SME space, there's been almost an attitude of saying, well, why would they go after us? I don't know if your experience is the same, Martin, but when we speak to SMEs, there's almost an element of, I'm all right, Jack, they won't come after me.
yeah, I agree.
And when we look in the SME space, we see statistics showing around that 30% or more companies don't have any protection in place, or certainly don't run any regular vulnerability scans.
The real driver for Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus seems to be people being told by either the suppliers or the clients that they have to have it. If you're a training organization, for instance, and you do training work for the government insists on you having Cyber Essentials. Cyber Essentials, by the way, Steve, it's a self-assessment. The minimum cost is, I think, £320 plus VAT for a business of 1 to 9 users. You get access to the portal. That's where 30 questions around cybersecurity. The questions are leading, the things like, have you turned autoplay off? The clue is autoplay should be off. Have you updated with the latest security patches? Again, from the questions, you kind of know the answers. Once you fill that out, you can submit it, and if your answers are all acceptable, somebody like me will check it and issue you a certificate. After that, Cyber Essentials Plus, it's an on-site independent audit of your Cyber Essentials assessment. Somebody like me will turn up and confirm everything you've said in the self-assessment is correct. Some people want the certification to enable them to deal with who they're dealing with, and they're not always 100% honest, or perhaps not as careful with the answers as they should be.
And sometimes there's almost some technical fear around, is my answer, is my response accurate? As in, does it reflect what we do on a day-to-day basis, or is it what the assessor would like to hear? If we look at the current landscape and how attacks can affect businesses of all sizes, in your experience before CyberShelter, being the technical guru in your previous company, where do SMEs show their weaknesses?
As an SME, you've really got to have a think about what you're trying to protect. If your data is worth a lot of money, you need to pay a lot more attention to your cybersecurity. If your data is data that's only in the public domain, well, you've still got data that should be protected. You've got a list of all your clients. If somebody manages to compromise one of your systems and take some of your data, the minimum is your reputational damage. If somebody's dealing with you, somebody's trusting you with their business, if it comes out that you've been compromised, then your reputation is without doubt going to take a hit. Usually, the biggest threat is phishing attacks and people giving away the credentials. Everybody's getting emails from people who aren't who they say they are. But it's not people doing this. Now it's what I call bots, software bots, and they're just churning away, sending emails. If they get a response, they'll pass to another bot, and that bot's job is to just try different applications. And eventually, at some point, they'll get so far down the line, a human gets a ping, probably via your email. The sales bot will be saying success, 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 hand over to a human. And at that point, a human will then make an assessment on how much further they can get.
And that almost sounds unfair when you've got more than one bot, could be AI powered, humans at the back end who are going after a single account, single credentials. But what's interesting in my experience of working around security and identities, that actually the weakest part in the chain is us.
Yeah, oh yeah,
We,
without a doubt.
we always say you could have the most sophisticated hardware with the most secure software,
Yeah.
but the wetware who's using it
Yeah.
is often the weakest link in the chain. The statistics show now people don't hack in, they log in.
Multi-factor authentication can still be compromised. There are various methods. There's a very technical method, which I won't go too deeply into, using Office 365 and sending a share link from your Office 365 OneDrive account. And if you click on that link, it can actually swerve multi-factor authentication. And what happens is a man-in-the-middle attack occurs. So as that user is logging in, they can actually see the screen and they can see what's happening and what's getting typed in. You then, when you log into your Office 365 account, somebody else has also logged in. They don't log out. Then what they do is they set up email rules. I do have a minor beef with email rules on an email account because they're not easy to see if you've got email rules set up. What you can't do with an email rule as well is forward email. And then what happens is somebody at their leisure goes through the emails and what they're looking for are invoices. I had a compromise several years ago now. As it happens, this particular company are no longer trading, not for this reason. They were doing TV advertising and I think the quarterly bill was for £90,000. And I was called in to do the forensic because they ended up giving away £90,000 and they needed to know exactly how it happened. So I got pulled in to do the forensic, read through all of the Exchange server email logs. What it turned out had happened is the financial director had had an email from Microsoft saying, your mail's queuing up, we can't deliver it, please confirm your username and password. And of course, being a busy guy, email address, password in, completely forgot about it. In the background, an email rules being set up. And the people who did the compromise, they were reading all of the email. They worked out the name of the financial controller who worked for them. They set up a domain which was almost identical to the media companies, but it varied very slightly. And then they set up a dialogue with the financial controller saying, oh, we just want to point out our bank account details are changing at the end of the week. Be aware of this. What we'll do is we will send you an updated invoice. And because it was all done so slowly and so quietly, there was no real hassle about paying the invoice, £90,000. And going back to what you're saying about, will people really bother with me? Well, 90 grand's a pretty good payday. The initial compromise on that one, a bot sent that email out saying it was Microsoft, it wasn't a person. The clever thing there was the sort of dialogue. They read the way the emails were formatted and the way people were engaging with each other and they replicated it.
If we take this example with this email rule and the Microsoft phishing email and then the dialogue with the FD and ultimately the $90 payment, if there was one thing that company could have done to try and mitigate or prevent some of this on day one, what would have been the thing they should have done?
I mean, really, that's not a technical hack. It's, it's a social hack. And the best response to that sort of thing is a social response. They should have picked the phone up. Or when you get an email saying the bank account details have changed, pick the phone up.
Mentioned there, that's a social compromise, and that's slightly different from a technical compromise.
Yeah.
without going down rabbit hole,
Yeah.
what would be the differences between the two?
After the social hacks and the phishing attacks, the biggest issue is what's called unpatched software.
Right.
There's a standard called the CVSS, a Common Vulnerability Scoring System. If an issue scores more than 7, meaning it's quite a serious issue, that has to be patched within 14 days. And that's on both the operating system and any software you're using. One of the other caveats of being Cyber Essentials certified is your software. You can only have on a machine software that you actually use.
Right.
So if you buy a new computer, it's full of what's called bloatware. It has to be removed as part of the standard.
That's very interesting. You mentioned about unpatched software, because particularly if we touch on the operating system side of it, we know Windows 10 is going to become end of life
2025.
2025. So it's next year. We're
Yeah.
only weeks away
Yeah.
as we speak now, Martin. Would that pose a similar risk?
Absolutely. I mean, when we come to do the assessments, Windows 7 has a very, very well-known security issue. Over the ins and outs of it, but a complete and utter compromise of the machine's possible. And the method of doing it, it's out there, it's on the internet. Having unpatched software with these kind of issues is so serious. Answering that one question, what operating systems are you running? If you put Windows 7 in that list, no matter how good everything else is in the assessment, it's an outright fail. So some of the questions, you can have a minor non-compliance. I think you're allowed maybe 5 of them. You can have a major non-compliance. You can have 2 of them. Autoplay is enabled. That's a major non-compliance, but it's not going to make you fail the standard. Some of them are so serious, though, it's an outright failure. You just won't qualify for Cyber Essentials.
So we see, I was reading an article only earlier this week, the Sky Business Broadband had issued this, talking about the cost of security incidents, not just from a pound, shillings and pence perspective, but from time lost in the business. The article was saying the business wasn't trading for 4 days. It ended up costing 120K. And this was a small business.
We have been involved in a small business that managed to allow an encryption virus into their network. They got the blue screen. They got a message on saying, please enter your key, contact us on this email, and we'll sell you a security key, Bitcoin. They didn't want to pay it, which is the right thing to do. And they were out of business for 4 or 5 days while the server was rebuilt from scratch. And what we also had to do was we had to make sure none of the internal assets, the PCs or the Macs or whatever, could reinfect the server. So everything had to be cleaned out and rebuilt. So they were out of business for 5 days. And 6 months later, in conversation with the MD, he thought he'd lost about 30% of his business. His numbers were down by 30%. The other thing I was going to mention is I had another client, and I'm really not recommending this. They had an encryption virus, and they decided to get in touch with the people who put the virus on. And the guy said it was absolutely amazing. It was like ringing a call center. Said he could hear other people in the background. They sent him the decryption key. He had to pay a fair bit of money. They wanted something ridiculous like 50K. And he got them down to about 6 or 7K, which he paid. He got the decryption key and it didn't work. However, he rang them back and he got transferred to one of the technical people who talked him through making the decryption key work. And that really just goes to show that this is literally a business now. This isn't a few people who just want to get money out of you and then throw you to the dogs. These people understand to keep their reputation, they've actually got to give some kind of a service back.
That's incredible to hear.
It absolutely amazed me. Again, part of the standard is malware protection. Something that people do because it's well publicized is they will make sure malware protection is turned on. With Windows, it's Windows Defender. And with Apple, it's something called XProtect, which comes with the Apple operating system. The problems with these two pieces of software is they're not centrally managed. So if you've got a suite of, say, 10 computers and somebody's Windows Defender isn't working, you've got no way of telling
Right.
unless somebody physically checks that machine. The better option is to have something that's centrally managed. And you can see on a web portal straight away. Have they had the latest updates? That sort of thing. Part of the standard, again, Steve, is that we test. Something people never ever do is test if their anti-malware is working.
Well,
We have files that they look like malware. They're perfectly safe. If they do get through, they don't do any damage at all. They just open Notepad and say, please contact your IT. But they look like malware. And we actually test the malware's functioning the way it should be.
I'd like to ask, we look at Cyber Essentials as a bare minimum standard.
Yeah.
If an organization who are currently Cyber Essentials certified and we're thinking about that step up to Cyber Essentials Plus, having it fully audited, checked and tested, etc., what additional benefits does that bring to their business?
Well, first of all, the Cyber Essentials Plus certificate shows people that an independent assessor is actually being on site. But in addition to testing and checking all of the Cyber Essentials answers, we start sending pseudo viruses around the network. We send emails with viruses attached. We'll send each user around 20 emails. If any of them gets through, which on a lot of modern email systems, they don't, they get filtered out before they even hit your network border. But if any of them get through, we then make sure that the user is issued with warnings when they try to open those viruses. We open up web browsers and we make sure that web browsers issue a warning. Another compromise is if your web browser's out of date and you go to a malicious website, that out-of-date web browser can be compromised. If you're a small business, if you've got 5 or 6 machines, we tend to just sample everything. The vulnerability software scans every individual port, and I don't want to get too technical, but computers can have multiple conversations. So you can be using email, you can be on several different websites. They do this because they've got ports built into the operating system. By default, there's 65,000 of them.
65,000.
Sounds like a lot, but if you open up a website, you'll probably open up 80 or 90 ports.
Okay.
We test 65,000 ports for around 100,000 known vulnerabilities.
Wow.
The report you get back will give you basically a green, amber, red. And anything with a CV score of over 7 has to be remediated.
If I was sat here as an SME business owner, what are the 3 things I could do today to improve my security?
So if I send you an email, at the top of the email, it'll say Martin Hart.
Correct.
To see my email address, you only have to click on that.
Mm-hmm.
That can be spoofed. Okay. Quite easily. You'd have to click on it to say it's not my email address. You can change the settings of your email client to show the full email. So that's a great start. Check your rules periodically. Make sure any rules there have been set up by you. There are mail filtration systems. I've used Barracuda in the past, by the way, and they're excellent. These things are very, very good at filtering out dodgy email because you're not the only person who's had a malicious email. They send hundreds of thousands of them out. One thing I do say to people is encourage your staff to be very, very open. A different company I've dealt with, they had a compromise. What happened over Christmas a few years ago, everybody's on holiday except the financial controller, another lady, and the financial director. Well, he had a reputation as a bit of a monster. You know, people were frightened of him. So she started getting emails from him over the Christmas break saying he'd just engaged with a new supplier. He'd fill out the documentation when he got back after Christmas, but please pay them £500 immediately. She paid it. And she kept getting the emails until they got to about £35,000. And at that point, she thought, I'm going to have to ring him because he's not following the procedures. And he just said, I don't know what you're talking about. The emails weren't from him. But if she'd had the confidence to pick the phone up as soon as she got it, he would have just immediately said, no, they're not from me.
Fantastic, Martin. It's been absolutely brilliant talking to you this morning. If we wanted, or anyone who comes across this conversation wants to look at Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus, I know they can always talk to us here at Thinc to engage with yourself. Or how would they get in touch with you, Sam?
Well, my email address is, the generic one is info@cybershelter.co.uk. What I always tell people, everybody, is an email costs nothing.
And if anyone wanted any more information around cybersecurity tools or Cyber Essentials certification, there's a lot of information on our website too. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, absolute pleasure.